Alright, we are back with a new video, and today we are once again updating the power rankings for the Circle Season 5 following the second batch of episodes, and this was slightly better in my opinion. Now admittedly, there were some things I didn't care that much about, though there was some interesting gameplay and drama that happened this week, which we'll be getting into in a moment, but there are 10 players to talk about, and let's not waste any more time, let's get right into the video. So starting off at number 10, we have the first boot from this week, and here we have Billie Jean, aka Bruno. And I said this last week, I didn't think Bruno had that great of a chance of winning the game. I felt like she was in a pretty poor position, where despite Chaz being on her side, I felt like Chaz had plenty of other options. And while we saw during this latest round that Bruno was able to build a bond with Shubi to where Shubi built an alliance with her, it wasn't enough to carry the day, and Shubi chose to block her over Jennifer. And at the end of the day, I don't think Bruno played that great of a game. I felt like she probably would have been better off playing as herself, as I feel like one of her biggest problems was her not opening up to other people and not making herself vulnerable. That's something that Chaz really hammered home during this particular round, where he felt like she should open up more to Shubi in order to make Shubi want to save her. And obviously, it didn't quite pan out that way, though by that point, I think Shubi recognized that it was probably better for his game to keep Jennifer anyway. But again, I feel like Bruno didn't play that great of a game, so because of that, she is here at number 10. Now we're moving on to number 9, and we have the other boot from this week, but here we have Shubi, aka Sasha. And Shubi had a very entertaining rise and fall over the course of this batch of episodes, where you could definitely tell that he wanted to play more strategically this time, and I feel like we saw him at least attempt to do that, although obviously it was very ineffective. Now, I think something that really harms him is the fact that he had to play as a catfish, and considering that Shubi is a pretty genuine and honest guy, I assumed that he wanted to hold back to avoid telling too many lies, as he probably recognized that he would be bad at lying and that he would be bad at playing someone that he was not. But I also feel like he went too far in the opposite direction, where by him trying to not get caught in a lie or inconsistency, that he ended up not sharing enough and opening enough to where he was able to build social bonds. And I feel like that led to a lot of his offers to build alliances come off as really sudden to a lot of players, where they were not sure whether he was fully committed to them. And obviously that backfires even more once Shubi decides to block Bruno over Jennifer, someone he had already built an alliance with, and someone he built an alliance with before he built a bond with Jennifer. Now, I do think he probably made the right decision in saving Jennifer, as he obviously would have gotten Tom on his side as well, and he probably recognized that Bruno was more so on his own during a lot of the game. But obviously, it comes back to bite him when Bruno decides to throw him under the bus during her farewell message, and that in turn only sketched out even more people. You have him trying to build this all newbie alliance that would flip the game against the original players, except none of the players are really that comfortable with it, and especially considering the whole Bruno situation. And really, I feel like a lot of the edit was dunking on Shubi as well, where despite him trying to play the game strategically, and despite him having more of an instinct to play the game, you could just tell that a lot of people were just not on board with it, and he just was unable to build bonds as a catfish to make people that comfortable with him. And when it came time for the blocking, it made sense for him to be blocked, especially someone from Chaz, who despite Marvin greatly upsetting Raven, someone he was close to, it still made sense for Chaz to take out Shubi, and especially in a spot where Shubi was tanking Chaz in the ratings. So on the whole, Shubi didn't play that great of a game, despite him trying to play more aggressively this time. However, it was still very fun to watch. It was still fun seeing him at least try to play a different game this time and having it largely blowing up in his face. But again, he was taken out here, so because of that, he is here at number 9. And with that, there are 8 players left in the game to talk about, and as usual, I'll be ranking them based on how lucky I think they are to win the game from this point. But at number 8, we have a player that has been sort of the center of attention this past week, but here we have Marvin. And Marvin was at the center of a lot of the drama that played out, where obviously he got picked to go on a date with Tamira after winning the challenge. And during that, he essentially flirted with Tamira to the point where it kind of turned into a showmance to a degree, I guess, despite Marvin already kind of having a showmance with Raven as well. And then when Tamira decides to reveal this to Raven, it obviously spreads across the entire house, and from that point on, Marvin kind of becomes a target to a degree. Now, if I'm being honest, I don't think Marvin bonding with Tamira is that bad for his game, as I feel like on other shows, without the context of showmances and how this is a quote unquote single season, that Marvin bonding with Tamira here wouldn't be that bad. I mean, he is building an alliance here. He is building someone that would rate him highly and someone that would support him in the game. But with the context of this being a showman's, and with the context of him supposedly only being loyal to Raven, it obviously blows up in his face to where he is tanked in the rating significantly during that final rating and was seen as a potential option to be taken out. You also have him drawing suspicions from Tom to where Tom wanted to target him, but obviously he is spared in the blocking over Shubi. But even so, I feel like a lot of the edit was dunking on him to where I don't really see him winning the game from this point. I feel like moving forward, he'll be someone who will continue to be tanked in the ratings unless he is somehow able to turn it around. Though, honestly, considering with this cast, I don't think it's super likely. And I feel like even if he got to the end, I don't think there's anyone that would really feel comfortable rating him too highly. So, because of that, I do have him here at number 8. Now we're moving on to number 7, and I'm not entirely sure what to make of this person. Although, based on what we've seen so far, I don't think it's super great. But here we have Tasia, aka Tamira, and the impression that I get from Tamira isn't great. Now, if I'm being honest, I feel like she wasn't really shown too much in the edit, and the set that we did see wasn't that great. I feel like there are a number of people that don't feel that close to Tamira, and we eventually see that in the rating where she gets 6th place in the rating, which isn't great. But even beyond that, we see her obviously get involved in the Marvin situation where she is chosen by Marvin to go on the date. Now, some of that is because Marvin was pretty close to her and was already tempted to bond with her some more. And they do bond, they do flirt to a degree. And it did seem like Marvin was someone that Tamira could have on her side. However, she then decides to tell all this information to Raven and Sam, which in turn blows up Marvin's spot. Now, admittedly, it does build her some good favor with Raven, as she's shown as the one who told Raven about this, while making Marvin seem bad because he didn't reveal this to Raven. But I still think this is a net negative for Tamira's game, as really all she's doing is making it harder for Marvin to survive in the game, someone who I do think would prop her up in the ratings and someone who could be an ally for her. And in return, despite all this talk about how Raven praises Tamira for telling her this, I mean, it's not as if Tamira's position is that greatly improved by this either. Again, she still gets 6th place in the ratings, and you still have people that don't feel that comfortable around her. So I don't think Tamira's in that great of a spot. Now, could she move up? Potentially. But considering how she's already been in a couple of episodes at this point, it hasn't really been shown that much in the edit, and certainly not propped up that much in the edit. I can't really have her any higher than number 7 here. Now we're moving on to number 6, and we have a player that I don't really have much to say on, but here we have Oliver, the latest arrival in the game, and he definitely had a pretty interesting entrance with it coming out of nowhere, with them foregoing a lot of the anticipation and the formal introductions, waiting until the middle of the party to just blindside the viewers with this twist, and it turns out his name is Oliver Twist. Ha ha ha. But really, outside of that, I don't think Oliver gets that much screen time. He hasn't really made that big of an impression in terms of him building relationships. Now, we do see him bond with Sam, but sort of similar to Tom and Jennifer from last week, we still haven't seen him actually be rated by anyone. So it's hard to say where he truly stands in the game right now. But again, he could potentially move up. But with the lack of evidence in his favor, I can't really have many higher than number 6. Now we're moving on to number 5, and I did briefly consider putting this person above the next couple people we'll be discussing, but for now I did decide to lead them down. But here we have Sam, and I do think Sam is getting a bit more active in the game. I mean, we do see her join this alliance with Raven and Tamira, and it does seem that people are opening up to her a bit. We are seeing her bond with Oliver, for example. But even so, I don't think she's really improving her position in the game too much, where I feel like she's still sort of under the radar to a degree. And we even saw her do not that great in the rating. She got 5th place in the rating. And to me, that sort of reflects how Sam could be seen as this endgame threat, someone who could be seen as very likable, but not really had the strategic wherewithal to really overcome that to avoid being tanked in the ratings. So I'm still a bit conflicted on Sam. Do I think she could win? I think she could. Although, based on the game that she's played right now, I can't really prop her up more than the people we'll be discussing soon. So, because of that, I do have her here at number 5. Now, moving on to number 4, and we have someone who I do think has played the game a bit more actively than Sam, but also has some more mixed elements to their edit from this week. But here we have Tom. And I think it was pretty interesting seeing Tom play this week, where obviously during the first 2 episodes, a lot of his focus is on him trying to help save Jennifer when they're on the block due to them losing out on the challenge. And then later on, starting to get more suspicious of Marvin, particularly around the Marvin situation. Though even then, like, a lot of his accusations seem to be pretty independent of that. And there are some good things, there are some not so good things. On one hand, he does get first place in the ratings, which is somewhat attributed to him opening up more during the challenge, but I also think reflects the bonds that he's built throughout the game. He also gets his way in saving Jennifer during that first round, where Shuby is essentially able to decide that Jennifer and Tom are essentially a duo package versus keeping Bruno. And considering the fallout that stems from Shuby evicting Bruno and Bruno throwing him under the bus, I do think that benefits Tom to a degree. But with that said, I think there are other elements to where Tom doesn't quite get his way. I do think he allows Chaz to get his way during the blocking, where obviously a lot of the focus in the edit was about him getting more suspicious of Marvin, which did seem to imply that Tom wanted to target Marvin more. And you also have Shuby, who was more willing to work with Tom moving forward compared to Marvin, and was willing to go as far as to build a 3-person alliance with him and Jen, and also build that new personal alliance that could have benefited Tom to a degree. But in the end, Tom doesn't get his way. Shuby ends up going home instead of Marvin, and I do think that is a knock against Tom's edit, and also his game, as I think Shuby going here benefits Chaz's game way more than it benefits Tom's. Now, yes, Tom and Jennifer could collaborate moving forward to target Chaz and Raven for being the big threats. However, considering the amount of focus that Tom got in the edit with him getting more suspicious of Marvin, does leave Tom in looking in not the best light. Now, again, I think Tom is probably going to get towards the end of the game, but considering the things that were against him, I can't really have many higher than number 4. Now moving on to number 3, and I did decide to drop this person compared to last week, but here we have Raven. And Raven, I think, is still in a solid spot. I think there's still a lot of people in the game that want to work with her and recognize that she's a power player, but still want to work with her moving forward. Although I do think her threat level is starting to rise, as we saw in the latest ratings, where she got 4th place, and even Shuby decided to tank her and Chaz in the ratings, which could explain why she hasn't become influencer in this past round. But I also think moving forward, she will continue to be a pretty big presence in the game. Now, I do think she's mostly presented positively due to the Marvin situation, even though I don't think it benefits her game that much. Now, yes, I understand her sentiment, how she saw Marvin's relationship as more than just an alliance, how she saw it as a genuine relationship, and how she is worried about how Marvin could be duplicitous moving forward. However, I could also see it backfiring in her game, where if she's able to get out Marvin, then that leaves her in a worse spot moving forward. And considering the concerns that I have with her strategic game in the future, I do think that could eventually come back to bite her. But again, I still think there's a lot of people who like her. I still think she has that potential frank upside of getting towards the end of the game, and despite her being very likable, people aren't that threatened by her and still rate her highly in the final ranking. I still think that potential is there, but I don't think this past week was that great for her from a game standpoint. So because of that, I do have her here at number 3. Now moving on to number 2, and I did bump this person up compared to last week. But here we have Brett and Xanthi, also known as Jennifer. And I said this before, but I still think that Jennifer is the better player between them and Tom, and a player that I think could benefit quite a bit by doing well in the ratings, by being well liked, but also someone that can potentially make some optimal moves. And we saw that at the end of this batch of episodes, where Shubi decided to visit Jennifer and decided to warn them about Chaz and taking out the big threats. And I think Jennifer would be more likely to do that compared to so many other players left in the game. Now, there are still elements that I don't find particularly great. One, the fact that they chose to back Shubi during that initial challenge that made them vulnerable in the first place is pretty bad, not just in the sense that they were vulnerable by it, but the fact that they assumed that the majority of the house would back Shubi versus Tamira is a pretty bad read in their view, and one that almost cost them the game. However, thanks to their work and campaigning with Shubi, they were effectively able to convince Shubi to save them by pointing out the fact that they would have Tom on his side if he chose to save them. And I do think that's pretty good work on Jennifer's end. And I also think moving forward, I have more confidence in Jennifer to convince Tom to take the shot against Chaz and Raven and put themselves in a better position towards the end game. So I do think Jennifer is someone that I have more confidence in to make some of these big moves down the road, considering the clout that they have and considering their ability to make optimal strategic moves. Now, I still have reservations about them actually winning if they get to the end, as I do think compared to Raven or even the person we'll be talking about at number one, I do worry how they will do in a final rating, both from their perception, but also compared to history, where we saw someone like Nick play this very strategic game, but then get tanked in the rings at the very end. So I do worry about them in that regard. But compared to a lot of other players, I have more confidence in them to navigate the end game. So because of that, I do have them here at number two. And now, at number one, the player I believe is the most likely to win the circle right now is still Chaz. Now, I still think there are concerns with Chaz moving forward. I mean, we did get that little thing at the end that implies that Jennifer could be targeting Chaz in the future, recognizing that he's a big threat. And even this past rating, while he was still able to win Influencer, we saw Shubi tank him in the ratings. And I do worry that similar to Raven, he could have a similar fate in the future where people could start to recognize him as a big threat and through that tank him in the ratings. However, the fact that Raven was tanked in the ratings earlier than Chaz does lead me think that there could be some confidence in Chaz where he could have the ability to lower his own threat level to make people comfortable around him and to make people feel comfortable that he could not be that big of a threat. Now, again, there are still concerns with him moving forward, but I still think he's playing the best game on the season right now, where he is more or less dominating the game. And compared to Raven, I think he's the one who's thinking about the game more strategically, even though on the show, we are still getting plenty of content of him talking about opening up and really embracing the more human elements of the game. But he is still thinking about the game. He is still playing the game. And I think we saw that with him getting his way and blocking Shubi over Marvin that last vote, where obviously Shubi was someone who was tanking him in the ratings, so by getting rid of Shubi, that benefits his game way more than it benefits Tom's. Now, yes, he does lose Bruno, which he did not want to happen, but again, considering the circumstances of that round where it was Shubi having sole control, he couldn't really do too much in that regard. But at the end of the day, I still think Chaz is positioned pretty well to get towards the end of the game. And I feel like compared to Raven, I have more confidence in him to win the game. But again, things could change. But with the way things stand right now, I do decide to have him here at number one. And there we go. That will do it for this week's video. If you like this content, be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps out with the channel. Now I'll be back again next week to update the Power Rankings again, so stay tuned for that. I'm also continuing to make more general Survivor content during the off season, so stay tuned for that as well. And if you haven't already, be sure to join my Discord server, which I'll leave a link to join in the description. There's a lot of stuff coming your way. But for now, that's the video. See ya.